The vast expanse of Varatha Prime's orbital city glittered like a jewel against the endless backdrop of space. Tens of thousands of ships, ancient behemoths, sleek cruisers, and shimmering war vessels crowded the grand docking rings, their silhouettes speaking of power earned over millennia. It was the heart of the Galactic Concord's annual summit, a gathering of the galaxy's most advanced civilizations, where decisions shaped the fate of entire star systems. Among the sea of titans, a small convoy emerged, human ships, their hulls modest, far from the imposing vessels surrounding them. They slipped into the docking bays quietly, unassuming. The human fleet was a mere whisper in a roar of warships, a mote of dust in a storm of giants. Alara Wynn stood on the bridge of the lead ship, the Argus, staring out at the dazzling sprawl of the city. The summit's buzz filled the comms channel. Alien, voices rich and varied, speaking in a dozen tongues, each confident in their own supremacy. But here, the humans were outsiders, barely noticed except for the mockery they drew. The humans actually showed up with that? The Yskari admiral's voice crackled over the open channel, dripping with disdain. His flagship, a monstrous dreadnought adorned with hundreds of weapons arrays, loomed nearby like a predator surveying prey. A chorus of alien laughter followed. The Yskari were known for their arrogance, their pride tied to their colossal fleets and centuries of dominance. To them, humanity's small contingent was a joke, an insignificant curiosity, perhaps fit for a footnote in galactic history. Alara did not respond immediately. Instead, she allowed the insult to linger, her gaze calm but unyielding. She knew better than to waste words on fools who judged by appearances. She closed her eyes for a moment, feeling the weight of centuries of human history and survival behind her. The wars, the struggles, the relentless drive to adapt and overcome. Her voice finally cut through the murmur, clear and steady. Size is not the measure of strength, nor is the number of guns. We are here to contribute, not to be paraded. A tense silence followed. The admiral sneered but said nothing more, unwilling to reveal cracks in his bravado. Yet Alara sensed a flicker of unease beneath the surface. Perhaps a hint that the humans were not as helpless as they seemed. The summit hall opened its gates soon after and representatives filed in. Alara moved among them with quiet confidence, observing. The alien delegates wore their pride like armor, each species certain of their place in the cosmic order. Yet behind the glittering facades, she detected fear. The Karul threat had been whispered in secret corridors, rumors of a force that no fleet had yet faced and returned from. For all their strength, the Concord's unity was fragile. Suspicion ran deep, alliances fragile, and the specter of Karul annihilation cast a long shadow. In this fractured environment, the human's presence was a wild card. At one point, Alara found herself face to face with the Yskari admiral. His gaze was sharp, assessing. Tell me, human, what makes you think your little fleet can face what we cannot? The Karul will devour your worlds as easily as a star burns. Alara met his eyes without hesitation. Because when others see only fear, we see opportunity. When others retreat, we fight. Underestimate us at your peril. The admiral's smirk deepened, but Alara caught the flicker of doubt in his eyes. She turned away, leaving him with his uncertainty. Later that evening, alone on the Argus's observation deck, Alara stood watching the stars. The city's lights dimmed in the background and the galaxy stretched before her, vast, dangerous, and unpredictable. Her thoughts drifted to Earth, a small blue dot light years away. The cradle of humanity's resilience. Despite millennia of hardship, humanity had endured and grown, tempered by adversity and sharpened by innovation. The tiny fleet they had brought was not a sign of weakness, but a calculated choice. Speed, stealth, precision. These were humanity's weapons. They had learned that size could be a liability, that survival required adaptation. She clenched her fists, her resolve hardening. The galaxy might laugh now, but soon they would learn what it meant to mock the tiny fleet. Humanity's fury was not measured in numbers or firepower, but in will, and that fury was awakening. Across the stars, a storm was coming, and humanity was ready to unleash it. The calm of the Galactic Concord shattered like glass when the void itself tore open. Reports came in from the outer fringe systems, star systems swallowed whole in moments, their suns extinguished under an unseen shadow. First, it was a flicker. On distant sensors, a sudden drop in energy signatures that no one could explain. Then entire colonies vanished, leaving only silence. Panic spread through the Concord like wildfire. The greatest fleets mobilized, racing toward the breach where space itself seemed to bleed dark energy. The ancient legends whispered in forgotten tongues were returning. Tales of the Karul, a monstrous force of biomechanical horrors said to devour worlds and minds alike. At the summit, where alliances once stood tall and proud, doubt seeped into every conversation. The overwhelming fear was contagious. If the Karul were real, then the entire Concord was vulnerable. And if the Karul were unstoppable, what hope remained for even the mightiest empires? Humanity's envoy was quick to respond, sending urgent transmissions offering aid, sharing sensor data and tactical analyses gleaned from decades of hard-won experience with unpredictable threats. Yet the replies were cold. The great powers of the Concord dismissed the humans' warnings as naive or desperate. Too little, too small, many scoffed. Let the giants handle this. On board the Argus, Alara Wynn stood in the command center, eyes scanning the data streaming across the displays. The grim figures revealed a truth the galaxy was only beginning to face. The Karul were unlike anything recorded in military archives. They adapted swiftly, overwhelmed conventional weapons and coordinated with unnerving precision. The Concord's massive fleets fought with bravado but fell like trees beneath an unseen storm. "Commander," her second-in-command said, voice tight with urgency. "The Karul are advancing rapidly. If they breach the Yaskari borders, it will be catastrophic." Alara's jaw tightened. "We don't have the firepower to stop them head-on, not yet." She stared out the viewport at the swirling black rift that had formed beyond the last system, an ominous wound in the fabric of space. The fleet's sensors struggled to penetrate the shadows. The Karul emerged from there, silent, deadly, and relentless. Then came the order she had anticipated. The Concord fleets were withdrawing, their pride shattered, their strategies failing. Retreat was the only option. Even the Yaskari, who had so recently mocked the humans, scrambled their forces to protect their homeworld. Their dreadnoughts, once symbols of invincibility, now fled with engines burning at maximum thrust. The galaxy was fracturing under pressure, and unity dissolved into chaos. Amid the turmoil, the human fleet did something unexpected. They vanished. Communications, with the Argus and its sister ships, went silent without warning. No transmissions, no distress signals, no responses. To the outside world, it looked like surrender, or worse, abandonment. But aboard the human vessels, it was a calculated withdrawal. "We're not running," Alara said quietly to her officers. "We're repositioning." In hidden sectors, far from prying eyes, the tiny fleet slipped into deep shadows. Cloaking technology activated, engines humming at near silence. For weeks, the human ships stayed hidden, gathering intelligence, refining their tactics and preparing for a counterstrike no one expected. Meanwhile, across the Concord, fear turned to desperation. The Karul devoured whole systems, their biomechanical tendrils tearing apart planetary defenses as if they were made of paper. Civilizations sent frantic calls for aid. The Concord leadership faltered, accusing each other of betrayal and weakness. Yet, humanity's quiet retreat was a mystery that gnawed at every alien mind. Why disappear when the galaxy burned? Were humans conceding defeat, or was something else brewing in the shadows? Alara knew the answer. Humanity had survived too long by adapting to the impossible. The tiny fleet was not a weakness, it was a weapon. A new form of warfare was being forged, built on speed, surprise, and precision strikes. She clenched her hands behind her back. Soon the galaxy would see what it meant to provoke a species who thrived on adversity. Humanity's fury was gathering, not in numbers but in resolve. And when it struck, the Karul and their arrogant mockers would regret ever underestimating the tiny fleet. The stars over the Oscan belt burned red with the fires of a battle no one could fully understand. For weeks, reports trickled in from outposts near the Yiskari homeworld, a front line of devastation and despair. The Karul advance had been relentless, their biomechanical warships overwhelming every defense. Entire fleets were shredded in moments. Yiskari dreadnoughts, once the envy of the Concord, became tombs adrift in space. But then, something impossible began to happen. Squadrons of Karul destroyers suddenly vanished without a trace. Sensors recorded sudden bursts of electromagnetic interference, brief pulses of gravitic distortion, and then silence. Where once a Karul flotilla had prowled, nothing remained but drifting debris, shredded hulls glowing cold in the void. Alien commanders were baffled. Invisible ships, some whispered, rumors spreading like wildfire. Ghosts that strike and disappear. The tales grew stranger. Survivors of these encounters described sudden attacks with no warning. Fleets were crippled before they even detected hostile presence. Their weapon systems were scrambled by unseen electronic warfare. Worst of all, eerie broadcasts flooded comms channels. Faint echoes of ancient Earth war songs, haunting melodies that carried a strange resonance even across light years. The Karul, for all their savagery, seemed unsettled. Their hive minds, so precise and ruthless, faltered as if confronted by something beyond logic. In the command deck of the Argus, Alara Wynn observed the reports with a quiet satisfaction. The tiny human fleet was no longer a joke. It was becoming a phantom terror. "Report on the latest strike," she ordered. A junior officer, eyes wide with awe, replied. The Karul flagship Vectar was destroyed near the Ryloth system. All enemy comms were jammed for 7 minutes prior. Then their ships were vaporized by multiple kinetic strikes in rapid succession. "Our losses. 3 drones. Good," Alara said, her voice calm but fierce. "Keep pressing. Hit them where it hurts." Unlike the massive Concord fleets, the human forces did not rely on overwhelming firepower or grand displays of might. Instead, they deployed hundreds of microfleets, small fast vessels armed with advanced cloaking tech and AI-directed weaponry. These fleets moved like swarms of deadly insects, striking isolated targets, then vanishing before counterattacks could be coordinated. Humanity's strategy was a stark contrast to the traditional galactic doctrine. Speed, stealth, and precision replaced brute force. Every strike was surgical. Every retreat was calculated. On the battlefield, alien commanders grew frustrated. Their grand armadas were helpless against an enemy they could not see or predict. At a makeshift Concord War Council, the Yiskari admiral who had mocked humanity weeks before slammed his fist on the hollow table. "How is this possible? Their fleet is too small, too weak." A senior Concord strategist replied grimly, "They've adapted. They fight differently. We underestimated them." Alara listened to the reports from the council via encrypted channels. The disdain of the past had turned to fear, then grudging, respect. But victory was far from assured. The Karul, sensing the growing threat, began adapting too. New tactics emerged, rapid counterstrikes, hive network disruptions, and biological weapons that targeted human ship systems. Each battle became a deadly chess match, with lives and worlds hanging in the balance. One night, as the Argus slipped through the shadowed lanes near the Ryloth system, Alara stood alone on the observation deck, listening to the faint broadcast, repeating across frequencies, the haunting ancient human war songs. It was a reminder, she thought, that humanity's fury was not new. It had been forged through centuries of conflict and survival. These songs carried the memory of battles past, the resilience of a species that refused to yield. Suddenly, alarms blared. Sensors picked up an incoming wave of Karul fighters, fast, deadly, intent on surprise. "Battle stations," Alara commanded, voice steady as the ship powered to full alert. The tiny human fleet sprang to life, cloaking disengaged AI piloting swarms of drones in rapid formation. The first wave of Karul fighters was met with a hailstorm of precise kinetic strikes. Explosions dotted the void, but the humans pressed on, their formations shifting fluidly like a living organism. In minutes, the Karul fighters were broken and retreating. Alara allowed herself a small smile. This was just the beginning. The galaxy had mocked their tiny fleet. But now, the question on every lip was the same. Who were these ghosts that hunted the Karul? And the answer was simple: humanity. The void above the shattered remains of the Cordell system burned with fierce activity. Starships darted like angry wasps, weaving between shattered asteroids and ruined orbital stations. The Karul swarm pressed forward, desperate to crush humanity's growing threat. But the tiny human fleet had transformed from ghostly shadows into a relentless inferno. On board the Argus, Alara Wynn's eyes flicked across the holographic battle map. Red dots, Karul vessels, clustered near the outer rim, but green dots, human microfleets, already encircled them like a tightening noose. "Status?" she asked sharply. "Drones deployed and engaging," her tactical officer replied. "The Karul are taking heavy losses, but their countermeasures are improving. They're scrambling our comms and deploying swarm missiles." Alara nodded. "Adjust frequency bands and increase drone autonomy. We can't afford communication lag." Across the system, thousands of AI-controlled drones streamed forward like a metallic river of fire. Each drone was a tiny predator, armed with miniaturized railguns and proximity mines, coordinated by a network of quantum processors that made them nearly impossible to predict or trap. Unlike the traditional fleets of massive capital ships, humanity's fighting force was a fractal storm, dispersed, adaptive, and fiercely intelligent. Their ships were small and fast, their weapons precise and deadly. This was a war waged on speed, stealth, and ruthless efficiency. In the thick of battle, Karul biomechanical ships twisted and convulsed, their organic armor rupturing under the relentless assault. Their hive mind network was straining to maintain coordination. But the human cyber warfare units hidden aboard stealth frigates launched viral attacks deep into the Karul neural links, spreading confusion and panic. "Cyber disruptors at maximum output," announced Alara's chief engineer. "We're scrambling their hive signals. They're losing synchronization." Alara smiled grimly. "Good. Break their minds as well as their bodies." But the Karul were far from finished. A massive swarm missile burst erupted from their flagship, the Vectar Reborn, lighting up the void with deadly precision. The missiles screamed toward human formations, detonating with catastrophic force. Human ships scattered, shields flaring as fragments of metal and energy slammed into them. But rather than break, the tiny fleets adapted instantly, reconfiguring their formations and deploying specialized countermeasures. Chaff clouds, electromagnetic pulses, and precision laser volleys that shredded incoming missiles mid-flight. "It's a dance," Alara said quietly to her officers. "Every move answered by another. They strike hard, we strike harder." The battle raged through hours, the outcome uncertain as fleets collided in brutal clashes. Yet amidst the chaos, a pattern emerged. Humanity's tactics began to erode. The Karul's advantage. In one daring maneuver, Alara ordered a covert strike team to slip behind enemy lines and attack the Karul command vessel. Cloaked and silent, the human frigates approached undetected, releasing swarms of hacking drones that burrowed into the organic ship's systems. Within minutes, the Karul flagship shuddered violently as its hive mind core was breached. The network faltered, the swarm in disarray. "Command vessel compromised," the tactical officer shouted. "Their coordination is breaking down." Seizing the moment, the human fleet intensified their assault. Tiny ships swarmed the disoriented Karul, ripping apart damaged vessels and cutting off retreat paths. The Karul's once impenetrable advance began to crumble. From her command chair, Alara issued a final order. "Push forward, no mercy." The firestorm of battle surged onward, a furious display of humanity's unyielding spirit. In the War Council halls of the Concord, news of the human counterattack spread like wildfire. Former skeptics stared in disbelief as reports showed the tiny fleet dismantling coral formations piece by piece. The galaxy's greatest powers were forced to confront a new reality. Humans had become the spearhead of resistance. Yet Alara knew this was only the beginning. The Karul would adapt, grow more ruthless, and seek revenge. But humanity's resolve had hardened. Every victory was paid for in sacrifice, every tactic refined through relentless trial. She looked out at the starfield beyond the viewport, endless, dark, and full of peril. "Let them come," she whispered. "We are ready." The tiny fleet had transformed from a joke to a legend, a firestorm rising from the ashes of mockery, ready to burn a path of fury across the stars. The Yuskari homeworld burned beneath an angry sky. Flames licked the once pristine cities and smoke billowed from shattered spires. The Karul swarm had pressed their assault to the very heart of the Yuskari Empire. Yet, despite the devastation, the Yuskari leadership refused to admit defeat. Driven by wounded pride and desperation, the Yuskari admiral who had once mocked humanity convened a war council. Against the advice of cautious allies, he ordered a massive offensive, a reckless gamble to crush the tiny human fleet and reclaim honor. Their dreadnoughts surged forward, their weapons blazing in a furious cacophony. The skies above the capital erupted in fire as Karul and human forces clashed violently. But the humans were ready. Alara Wynn, aboard the Argus, monitored the unfolding battle with cold precision. The Karul swarm was caught off guard by the ferocity of the human counterattack, but it was the Yuskari's overreach that sealed their fate. The human fleet had anticipated this reckless strike. Utilizing advanced AI-driven tactics and cyber warfare that disrupted enemy systems, the humans unleashed a coordinated ambush. Microfleets weaved through the battle, targeting Yuskari command ships and communications nodes, shields failing. On Yuskari flagship Gorus, the tactical officer reported, "Electronic warfare is crippling their targeting arrays." Explosions ripped through the dreadnought's hull. Panic rippled through the Yuskari lines as their massive warships faltered under relentless precision strikes. On the Argus bridge, Alara's voice was steady and commanding. "Maintain pressure, focus on command centers." The tide turned rapidly. The Yuskari flagship exploded in a blinding flash, sending shockwaves through their fleet. Morale shattered, their forces fractured. As the dust settled, Alara activated the fleet's communication channel, broadcasting a message that echoed across space. "Yuskari Admiral and leaders of the Galactic Concord, your arrogance nearly doomed us all. Humanity stands ready to protect this galaxy, but we demand respect. Underestimate our strength no longer or face extinction." The message sent shockwaves through the Concord. The galaxy's proudest empire had been humbled, not by the overwhelming force of numbers but by the unyielding will of a tiny fleet. Back in the War Council chambers, once hostile leaders stared at one another, forced to reconsider their stance. The humans' rise was undeniable. An uneasy silence filled the room as a conquered elder spoke. "Perhaps it is time to recognize that strength is more than just size. The humans have proven themselves in fire." Alara watched the shifting tides of galactic politics with quiet satisfaction. The tiny fleet was no longer just a curiosity or a joke. It was a force that commanded respect. But she knew the war was far from over. The Karul threat remained, and the galaxy's fragile alliance still hung by a thread. Yet this victory marked a turning point. Humanity had stepped from the shadows into the light, reshaping the balance of power. As the Argus prepared to move forward, Alara whispered to her officers, "This is only the beginning. We fight not just for survival but for the future of all who call the stars home." Outside the viewport, stars shimmered, silent witnesses to a war that would change the galaxy forever. The corridors of the Galactic Concord headquarters were filled with whispered conversations and hurried footsteps. The stunning defeat of the Yuskari flagship Gorus had sent ripples across every sector, and nowhere was the atmosphere heavier than in the council chambers. Delegates from dozens of star systems gathered, their faces grim and eyes shadowed with uncertainty. The fragile peace they once clung to now seemed tenuous at best. The Karul threat was no longer just a distant menace. It was a raging storm at their doorstep, and the humans, the tiny fleet that had defied every expectation, were fast becoming the galaxy's reluctant saviors. Alara Wynn stood apart from the crowd, watching the uneasy dance of diplomacy with a soldier's skepticism. She knew that the true battle was as much political as it was military. Old grudges, long-standing rivalries, and deep-seated fears would not vanish overnight. Yet something unprecedented was stirring, a chance to unite or to fracture completely. A sharp voice broke through the murmurs. The Karul liaison, a shadowy entity in an iridescent exosuit, addressed the chamber with chilling calm. Your divisions will not save you. The Karul advance is inevitable. Cooperation is your only chance. The room erupted in protests and heated debate. Yet amid the chaos, a clear voice rose. Elin Tresh, the human ambassador and voice of reason. We have survived by working together, by adapting and evolving. The Karul exploit division. It is time we stand as one. The declaration was met with a mix of skepticism and cautious hope. The humans had earned their place through battle, but trust was a luxury many were not ready to grant. Later, in a private chamber, Alara and Aelin met with key Concord leaders, representatives from the Karul's fiercest enemies and the galaxy's most pragmatic allies. The air was thick with tension as strategies and conditions were laid bare. Alara spoke plainly. We have proven that size isn't everything. Our microfleets can strike where the Karul are weakest, but we need the combined strength of the conquered to turn the tide. One elder, a tall figure from the aquatic Relan species, nodded thoughtfully. Your tactics are unorthodox but effective. Perhaps it is time for a new kind of alliance. Plans began to form. Coordinated strikes, shared intelligence, joint cyber warfare units. For the first time, centuries-old rivalries were set aside in favor of survival. The Galactic Concord was inching toward unity, not because it was easy, but because it was necessary. Meanwhile, Alara's thoughts drifted to the Argus's crew, men and women who had become more than soldiers. They were symbols of humanity's indomitable will. The tiny fleet had become a beacon of hope, but also a target. As alliances formed, the Karul sensed the shifting balance. Their attacks grew more ferocious, their tactics more brutal. The galaxy's fate hung in the balance, a fragile thread pulled taut by fear and courage alike. Yet amidst the uncertainty, one truth shone clear. Humanity had become the catalyst of unity in a galaxy on the brink. Alara stood on the observation deck once more, gazing into the star-studded void. The war was far from over, but the tides were turning. Together they might just survive the coming storm. We fight for more than survival, she whispered. We fight for a future worth living. The Karul swarm surged like a living tempest, a dark tide intent on swallowing the last bastion of resistance. The once vibrant system of Eltar Prime lay on the brink of annihilation. Its twin suns cast a pale light over crumbling cities and shattered fleets. It was here, at the edge of the known galaxy, that the combined forces of the Galactic Concord, led by humanity's tiny fleet, prepared to make their final stand. Alara Wynn stood on the bridge of the Argus, her expression steady but her mind racing. Years of battles had led to this moment. The Karul's relentless advance had been slowed but never stopped. Now, all that remained was a desperate gambit, a fight for survival or total extinction. Status report, she commanded, voice calm yet unyielding. Fleet formation stable, her tactical officer replied. Enemy forces estimated at 10-1. Their hive mind remains fragmented but dangerous. Alara nodded. We don't need to outnumber them. We need to outthink them. The human microfleets shifted into their meticulously planned positions, weaving a complex web of fire and deception. Cloaked frigates slipped through asteroid fields, launching swarms of drones that hunted the Karul's organic warships with lethal precision. The battle erupted with savage fury. Energy beams lit the void, explosions blossoming like deadly flowers against the black canvas. Karul tendrils lashed out, crushing and shredding human vessels. The air aboard the Argus was thick with tension as alarms blared and crew rushed to their stations. Amid the chaos, Alara's voice was a steady anchor. Hold the line. Prioritize. Protecting the civilian evacuations. We fight for every soul. In the heat of battle, alliances forged in desperation proved their worth. The Concord's warships, once skeptical of humanity's tactics, fought side by side with human pilots and engineers, their combined strength pushing back the seemingly unstoppable Karul. But the cost was brutal. Shattered ships littered the battlefield, debris drifting like ghosts of lost hopes. Human drones fell in waves, their metal carcasses drifting endlessly in the void. Alara watched as her own flagship took a heavy hit, shields flickering dangerously. "Damage report," she barked. "Reactor stabilizing, but we've lost propulsion in 2 sectors," the chief engineer reported. "Temporary repairs underway." Alara gritted her teeth. "We have to keep moving." As the Karul flagship, a grotesque colossus of writhing flesh and steel, bore down on the Argus, Alara made a critical decision. "Prepare for the counterstrike," she ordered. "Target the hive core. This ends here." The tiny fleet's coordinated assault focused all firepower on the Karul heart. Laser volleys, missile strikes, and cyber attacks hammered the monstrous ship's defenses. For a moment, the galaxy held its breath. Then the flagship shuddered violently, a burst of blinding light exploding outward. The Karul swarm faltered, their hive mind shattered. Disarray spread like wildfire. One by one, their ships fell or fled. Silence descended over the battlefield. Alara allowed herself a rare moment of relief as the fleet gathered, battered but unbroken. The war was far from over, but today, humanity had unleashed fury beyond measure, and it had been enough. In the quiet that followed, Alara sent a final transmission to the Conquered. "Let this victory be a beacon. Together, we can withstand any darkness." Her eyes drifted to the stars beyond, the endless frontier that still held countless dangers. But for the first time in a long while, hope burned bright. The battle had ended, but the war had changed forever. Above the smoking ruins of Eltar Prime's orbit, the tiny human fleet floated, scarred, battered, but undefeated. The Karul swarm was broken, its hive shattered like glass. For the first time in decades, the galaxy breathed a collective sigh of relief. On board the Argus, Alara Wynn stood at the observation deck, staring out into the endless night. The stars glittered cold and distant, but in their silent light, she saw something more, a promise. Behind her, the hum of the ship was steady, the crew moving with quiet determination. They had fought impossible odds, faced mockery and disdain, and emerged victorious. Humanity's fury had been unleashed beyond measure, and it had reshaped the galaxy. The Galactic Concord had begun to shift as well. Former enemies now spoke in cautious terms of alliance, cooperation, and shared futures. The war had forced unity where politics had failed. The tiny fleet, once dismissed as insignificant, was now a symbol of hope. Alara's thoughts drifted to the lives lost, the sacrifices etched in cold steel and burning memories. She carried the weight of every fallen comrade, every shattered world, every desperate moment where hope seemed lost. Yet from those ashes, something extraordinary had risen. A voice chimed softly through the comm, a message from Elin Tresh, the human ambassador who had been the voice of unity. "Admiral Wynn," Elin's tone was warm but firm, "the Council has approved the establishment of a new coalition, one built on trust, shared strength, and vigilance against any threat." Alara allowed herself a rare smile. It's time to build a future worth fighting for. The tiny fleet was no longer a fleet of shadows but a blazing beacon, a testament to resilience, ingenuity, and unyielding spirit. As the Argus prepared to jump to the next mission, Alara gathered her senior officers. "We've faced darkness and fury," she said, "but we are more than survivors. We are architects of tomorrow." Her crew nodded, eyes bright with determination. The galaxy was vast, its mysteries endless. New threats would arise, new challenges would test their resolve. But humanity had learned that size did not guarantee victory. Heart, courage, and unity did. In the final moments before the jump, Alara looked once more at the stars. A whisper escaped her lips, a vow to all who had fallen and all who would come after. We fight not just with weapons, but with hope. And with that, the Argus leapt into the starry unknown, humanity's fury blazing a trail of light through the cosmos, a fury forged not in spite, but in unbreakable resolve.